Okay guys, let's get started on this. We're going to be building the Harry Potter Rise of Voldemort. It has 4 minifigs. And actually, you could even say it has 5 minifigs because it has the statue on top of the gravestone is actually a big statue of another minifig, which I kind of dig. It's pretty cool. But we have Harry Potter, we got Lord Voldemort, we have Peter Pettigrew, and then the Death Eater. So we have the 4 of those. And this should be a quick build. It's got 184 pieces, and we can just chat and stuff like that, which would be good. And then when we do the speed build on this, which would be a very short speed build, but I usually give background. And I'm going to try to dig into this to see if there were any thing going on behind the scenes during the shooting of this scene. Let's go over this. We got some interesting tidbits, you know, trivia stuff, and some behind the scenes thoughts from the Lego build all the way through the movie. A lot of you might not have known this, but this was the first major theatrical debut of Robert Pattinson, and he played Cedric Diggory, and Pattinson was only 18 when he played it. He is the reason why I really enjoyed the Goblet of Fire. This was a big turning point, and actually this scene that they depict in this Lego build was actually the turning point where it took it from being child-friendly to not so much. This was turned Harry Potter into a much darker, more serious storyline, and so there were some great things about that. Also, we had Ralph Fiennes, who played Voldemort. He did not wear any prosthetic mask or any kind of extra makeup or anything like this I mean, he wore makeup for sure, but what they did with his nose is they just put theatrical telephoto tracking dots on his face. Like you've seen it when they're doing, like, I don't know, doing some robot stuff for the Avengers, and James Spader had all kinds of dots, or Spider-Man even had all kinds of dots on him, stuff like that. And so the special effects, or the visual effects guys, went in and frame per frame digitally removed his nose and made it much more eerie. So that's pretty painstaking, especially nowadays, for them to do it that way instead of a prosthetic nose. It looked much more real. Matter of fact, I recall when I was watching it going, how the hell did they do that? Because it did not look like it was a prosthetic of any nature, and it wasn't. And also in the book, Voldemort had red eyes, and so the film guys, the director decided that Ralph Fiennes' eye color, which was a light blue, gave him a much more real look, which made him much more sinister. So that was pretty cool. So they decided to do that. Just an FYI, the large tombstone here in the back is the Angel of Death. And of course, the Angel of Death tombstone represents Voldemort's father, who was a Muggle, and he murdered him in this little town here where all this is supposed to take place. Also, the fighting scene when the wands lock together, it's a rare effect called the Priori Incantatum. Because the wands share the same phoenix feather core, both Voldemort's and Harry Potter's. Voldemort's wand spits out ghastly echoes of all of his victims. Those are the spirits you see coming out of his wand. They're all his victims, so to speak. And so that was interesting. I always wondered what the reason was with that effect, you know, why they were doing it, and that's to represent Voldemort's all the people he's killed. Now onto the Lego stuff. One thing is pretty cool, and that's why I put these out individually. These are the exact things that Voldemort uses to create the resurrection potion. So they need the red jewel represents Harry Potter's blood, And then of course you have the bone, you have the baby Voldemort wrapped up, and then this right here represents Peter Pettigrew's hand, and that's what that's supposed to be, is represents his hand. And it's those four things together that created the potion. And of course you put those in the cauldron up here. And there's some interesting too about Pettigrew, about his hand and stuff. So his hand, as you can see, he's got the flesh colored hand, and then this one here is gray, and that represents when Voldemort gave him the fake hand or whatever it was. And also the Angel of Death. So the set says there's only 4 minifigs, and they're not wrong. So you have the Death Eater, you have Voldemort, you have Pettigrew, and then Harry Potter. But there's actually a 5th minifigure, which is the Angel of Death, that's on top of the tombstone. Now, the Angel of Death is made with actual minifigure parts, so it's not something completely different. It is definitely a minifigure, which is pretty cool. It's actually 5 minifigs, so you can count it because it's all the minifig parts. It's not something that they just kind of threw together. They put together using minifig parts. And then if you look at the gravestones here, you'll see the Deathly Hallows emblem. I think it's this one right here, right? And that, or their symbol, and that's just supposed to be an Easter egg foreshadowing later movies, which is pretty neat. Oh, like I was telling you, so the different color on Pettigrew's hands is a big reason why a lot of the design, or a lot of the collectors wanted to get this, because I believe, I'm not 100%, but I believe this is the only time. I think this is his 3rd minifig. So Peter's 3rd minifig, but this is the only time that this one has the silver magical reward from Voldemort in his hand, which is pretty sweet. Now, one thing about this build, it's kind of like a modern spiritual successor to the legendary graveyard scene, which came out in 2001. I don't recall if there were any differences. I don't believe there's a lot of differences. I think it was a bigger set though back in 2001. I'd have to do some research on that. But it's definitely a great duel and like an original nostalgic classic. So I'm assuming it's kind of almost the same, but just kind of a throwback. So that's pretty sweet. And then we already talked about the Lego designers intentionally making these 4 potion ingredients. So like I said, you had the bone that was taken from bone of the father. Basically, what was the phrase? I think it was bone of the father unknowingly given, flesh of the servant, which is the hand, willingly sacrificed, blood from an enemy forcibly taken, and then of course you have the baby Voldemort. Pretty interesting, pretty cool. One thing here also is when they filmed this scene, a lot of people figured that it was taken from an actual graveyard and stuff, but the whole graveyard, everything you saw there, was all built on a set. It's the Hangleton graveyard, and it was 100% a physical set built inside the Leavesden Studios in London. So the whole thing, that whole scene, humongous scene, was 100% actual, which was pretty sweet. And the crew, they spent weeks just carving all the tombstones out of their styrofoam and carved it out. And little known fact, if you freeze it in the movie and you're able to blow it up, from the art department you'll see names on the gravestones, and those are all the people that worked in the art department, and so they kind of had a kick out of that, which was pretty nice. Also, you remember when they grabbed the cup and the effects and all that, all flashed and all that? That was actually, there was no CGI made for that scene. That was 100% real effects done. So they had a heavy physical cup that was internally wired with the blue light and blue LED lights, and that's pretty cool. I love the fact that they didn't use any CGI when that was the scene that would have really called for it, but they didn't use any. It's all practical. You remember the first time we saw Voldemort, right? Or part of him was in the first battle scene that Harry Potter did. Voldemort was in the back of Professor Quirrell's head, right? So that was a different actor. That was an actor whose name was Richard Brimmer. And Richard was almost cast as Voldemort before Ralph Fiennes accepted the role. So it is definitely a different actor. So that first actor where he appears, where you see his head in the back of Professor Quirrell's head, that was Richard Brimmer, and then of course Ralph Fiennes took over the role. So that's pretty cool. What was that, third movie? I think was Goblet of Fire third movie. I'm thinking so. And then there was another scene that was, a lot of people didn't quite get this one, but so there was the missing Death Eaters, and I don't remember all the Death Eaters. Matter of fact, I don't know that I ever knew all the Death Eaters, but for this one here, in the book and the movie, there are specific gaps in the circle of the Death Eaters. Remember when you had all of them in the fight scene where they arrive at the graveyard? So Voldemort mentions 3 are missing. 1, too cowardly to return, which was in reference to Igor Karkaroff. And then the one who has left him forever, who was obviously Snape, who was at that moment was at Hogwarts. And then you had his most faithful servant, who was Barty Crouch Jr., who was at that time was disguised as Mad Eye Moody. So that was his whole background on that. And then the baby here, so this is some Lego trivia. This baby here is repurposed from another set. So what they did was they just took this baby in wrappings and stuff, and they repainted it. They just repurposed it for this scene right here. And the original one was in a baby carrier piece that was originally introduced as a cute collectible minifigure series. But they twisted it around, made it dark, made it gray. Like I said, this whole scene just changed everything, right? So there's a scene in there in the movie when they bring Cedric's body back to the stadium. You'll see Sirius Snape just take off his cloak and respectfully covers Cedric's body before Cedric's father runs down to the field. If you caught it, then that's a little insight to who Professor Snape was. One thing about the Lego piece is that this is, even as built in piece, it's surprisingly dark for Lego. The set is famous among adult collectors for being unusually dark for it being a kid's toy. It explicitly includes the dagger that Peter Pettigrew uses to cut Harry. The translucent gem represents Harry Potter's blood. It's just, for Lego, that's a pretty rare level of detail when you get into something like that. This was a fun build. Like I said, it took me an hour, and that was talking with people on there. So you could probably break it down to probably have it done in a half hour if you just focused on doing it. It was $45 at Walmart, and I think that's a little much for it. I do like the fact that you have the 5 minifigs, and I'm a big minifig guy. But the action on this build here is just weak. It's just weak. You know, I didn't care for it. I thought it was something you can move where you can have these guys battle, and the way they portray it, it looks like it does that, but it's nothing of the kind. So basically, you can have this set up to where Voldemort is hidden underneath this part here. So as you can see, if you need him to pop up all of a sudden, you just do that, and boom, there he is. He's up. Not worth 45 bucks there, Legos, in my opinion. However, the set is cute. It was a lot of fun to build, and you get 5 minifigs. I'll take that. And I think that's the end of all the trivia. Yep, this should do it for you.